Gaudete, gaudete, Christus es natus, ex Maria Virgine gaudete.
All right. So 3, 2, 1. So welcome to another episode of Rediscovery Channel, where each episode we look at a different part of history that the other person may or may not have heard of. Today it's myself, Stilger, and my good friend Ivor. And Ivor, this week I want to talk about the world's most powerful person, which after reading this book called The World's Most Powerful Person in the World, Xi Jinping, is about the current leader of the Chinese CCP, Chinese Communist Chinese Party. Which one is it?
I think it's Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah. Okay. So Xi Jinping, who I feel like a lot of people in the West know very little about.
Yep.
And I wanted to clear up a little bit more about who he is, because let me tell you, after having read this book, I can definitely feel that, or definitely see that he is by far the most powerful person in the world.
Can I ask you a question, Stilgar, before you get started? How does he compare with Ashurnasirpal II?
Oh, yeah, I don't know about that. How many people did Ashurnasirpal II rule over in total, like in his empire?
Good question. Obviously, not as many as Xi Jinping. I mean, he ruled a huge area, but not as big, and of course, not as populated.
Yeah. And was he able to control whether or not somebody could leave their apartment, or whether they could buy food or not, or whether they would have, the travel permission to take the train from one side of the country to the other?
I mean, there was no trains back then, so okay, yeah, I get that. I mean, there's definitely some technological innovations that allow for more control now than they did, in the ancient world, I would say for sure, yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, looking at the most powerful people of the world today, typically one would always say that the U.S. president was the most powerful person in the world.
No, I wouldn't say that at all.
That's how it was presented over here in Holland growing up. That was George Bush or Bill Clinton or whomever was the most powerful person in the world. But if you think about it, is that still the case? Maybe it was never the case. But
20th century, it probably was.
yeah,
Not more.
not anymore. And I think there's reasons for that lay within the United States itself. For example, the division that you have between the two parties, whereas one party is always trying to obstruct the other. China doesn't have that problem. There's only one party in China, which has absolute control and absolute power. But the other reason that China is now taking over the place as the supreme, or like the supreme world power, lies within its economy, which is booming, and also because it's more and more it's becoming a technological superpower. And previously, a lot of things were simply copied by China. It has a long history of stealing technology and then copying it and making cheap knockoffs and producing those on a mass scale. But that is no longer the case. Right now, China is actually leading in a lot of technological developments. And even when you're looking at some of the latest tech out there, like for example, they're now able to produce their own computer chips, which are actually in many ways better than anything coming out of the West. They've proven to be extremely resilient and resourceful, and of course it makes sense because it's a country of over 1.4 billion people, um, and it's producing um, a lot of engineers each year. I think, let me see actually how many it is. So yes, they produce 600,000 engineers each year that are graduating from their schools. Now, if you look at somebody from like a company that used to be ruling in the technology space, like Germany, it's only 40,000. In the United States, they produce, I cannot find it, the annual number. Great. Um, yeah, well, I can guarantee you it's not going to be nearly as many as China. So,
Also,
um,
United States, we make heavy use of foreign labor and contract labor when it comes to software development also. So a lot of it's overseas. And then, a lot of it is also developed by immigrant workers. I don't know if that's because we just don't have as much natural talent or people going into STEM as we used to, or if it's just that the corporations are trying to save money on that, on having contract workers rather than having a full-time employee. Probably mixture of both, I think.
yeah, I just found the number. There are currently 228,000 engineers employed in the United States. So China is actually producing 3 times as many each year that are coming out of the universities. I think it's probably a combination of things, but I want to talk a little bit more also about the culture that played a huge role historically in Chinese history, which of course is Confucianism. And that Confucianism was a big no go, or it was seen as a big evil by the Chinese Communist Party in the past. But similar to how Putin's Russia has refound some of its cultural roots, so to speak, with the Orthodox Church, you
Yeah.
see the same thing actually happening with Xi Jinping, whereas Mao Zedong, or I'm probably not saying that right, but he was fervently opposed to anything that had to do with the four olds, which was um, I don't know them all by
Like
heart, but
old customs, old traditions. Yeah, I should know that too. Put something in the slideshow mentioning the four olds.
yeah. So let me see. Anyway, old ideas, customs, culture, and habits of mind.
Okay.
So anyway, yeah. So that during the Cultural Revolution, there was this huge um, program to basically eradicate Confucianist history. But Xi Jinping is actually quite fond of the of some of the cultural traditions, and he has kind of reignited a love for like old Confucianist sayings and readings, and he's trying to reestablish this national identity, which is interesting. And by the way, if Xi Jinping, right, is often like shown as this ridiculous like portrait of a man, like they make him into this almost like a cartoon of a person. Um, but he actually has a very interesting history. This guy is no dummy. He didn't get to where he is today by accident, and I want to talk a little bit more about his background and what kind of man we're dealing with. Who is this? It's actually Z is his last name, so they start with Z. His first name is actually Jinping, but
Hmm.
in China they say it like in some other countries, last name first, then first name. Same with Mao Zedong. Actually, Zedong was his name, and then Mao was his last name. Anyway, Xi Jinping was born on the 15th of June in 1953. And he was actually the second son of Xi Zongsun, which was his dad, who was a communist revolutionary, and he was actually a political leader who was one of the founders um, of the Communist Party, and was close ally of Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong. So he actually was there when they did the Long March. He was part of it, um, and because of this, he was a very high-ranking person within the Chinese government. So Xi Jinping grew up in a privileged environment, actually really close to the Forbidden City, that was purely blocked off for the communist royalties, I would say almost. So he was kind of like a red princeling, where he grew up, and being taught everything about becoming the next leader of China, or becoming part of the elite. But in 1966, the Cultural Revolution started, and there was this purge that Mao started to try and reshape China, including its cultural elements. And Xi Jinping's father was accused of being a rightist, and he was demoted and imprisoned and sent off to a gulag, where he was being brainwashed. Which, interestingly enough, I learned from the book that washing somebody's brain is actually a Chinese saying that was one of the few Chinese sayings that made it into the English language, which I thought was interesting considering the world we live in today. Yeah, but his father was basically sent to a gulag for re-education, and his mother was forced to denounce his father publicly. After which, the stress was immense. So his elder sister actually ended up committing suicide, and Xi Jinping, who before was like this prince, he was now like treated like like the enemy of the state all of a sudden, and he was like humiliated by the Red Guards, which is like the radical youth group, kind of like the Antifa of today, beaten and humiliated, and you would often have to like denounce your family, denounce people in front, and then they would do all this humiliation practices.
Yeah. Also, Stilgar, and just for the audience, the Red Guards also used to deface places of worship and tear down statues.
Yeah,
So-
they that was part of their cultural crusade, right? So they destroyed a lot of Chinese cultural heritage, which, if you're looking into Confucianism, was, I think we've done an episode on Confucius, haven't we?
We have not. We did an episode on Chinese legalism,
Yeah.
or the philosophy of.
What was it? The guy that basically wrote this book that was very anti religion or anti-Confucianist. I forgot his name. Sorry.
Shang Yang is the father of Chinese legalism, and his was the philosophy that the Qin dynasty took up, which is actually pretty similar to communism, and but it's more, it's more bluntly stated. Whereas, like, you read the Communist Manifesto, and they're all like, "Oh, this is because we're fighting oppression, and this is for the good of the people." Like, that's how they frame it. Whereas with Sheng Yang, he would frame it more honestly and say, "This is for the good of the government, and this is how you maintain strong leadership." The idea of strong leadership was basically having a populace that could not resist, and they would say, don't let the people have any extra surplus of anything, make them work, but then take away all the surplus so that they're in a constant struggle to just subsist, and appoint middle officials that are hated by the people, administrators that are hated, so that they'll be loyal to you because they won't be supported by the people. and they'll be hated by the people. Stuff like that. Very, and they also said like don't let the people have music and rights. Just make them work all the time. And I'm paraphrasing, but yeah, it is like a proto Marxist kind of system. So
Yeah, and they saw the Marxists saw Confucianism as a great enemy because it taught you to respect your elders, for example. Um, it also taught you to be very studious. So
hmm
which is something that you see now reflected in Chinese culture, and it's making them extremely successful. Is to focus on becoming a scholar or being a scholar and working hard and learning as much as possible. But the Chinese Marxists saw it as um, an obstruction to their building of the new world, because in order to build the new world, they first had to break down the old world, which included like all these moral values, temples, yeah, statues, books, everything had to go, right, in order for them to be like re-educated into this new Leninist and Marxist world. Um, and actually, Xi Jinping, when he was 15 years old in 1968, he was sent to work in the countryside as part of the Down to the Countryside movement, which was a campaign aimed to re-educate the urban youth by exposing them to the hardships of rural life. So he was assigned to Longjihai, not saying that right, but it's a remote village where he lived in a cave house. He worked as a farmer, um, a party branch secretary, and a militia leader. And he spent 7 years working in the village, during which he endured poverty, hunger, and isolation. And he also read extensively, especially the works of Marx, Lenin, and Mao. So there's an interesting, from the psychological perspective, it's interesting because um, this had such a huge impact on his life, and um, his father was denounced, even though his father was part of the Long March and previously was a hero of the revolution. But his family fell from grace. He fell from grace from being this royal Marxist prince into being this outcast, where he was no longer part of the elite. And instead of what the author of the book that I read surmises is that instead of resenting the system, he doubled down. Like he proved extra hard to show that he was worthy, which is interesting. So like the accounts that are there from his time in this town where he was literally living in a hole. So this was a town where, and the country was extremely poor. Like China was extremely poor coming out of the war, and then going into this revolution, cultural revolution. Millions of people were dying from poverty, from hunger, millions. Um, but despite all this, Xi Jinping actually doubled down, and he actually worked really hard to become more zealous in his communist belief. And also, he like a lot of the accounts are that he's really working with the townmanship, trying to turn this ideology into a reality. So anyway, he was there for many years, um, and at some point he was allowed into the Chinese Communist Party, which because previously it wasn't allowed because his dad fell from grace with Mao, and he was able to become an active member. So yeah, he now says that this experience in the countryside has taught him the value of hard work, perseverance, and service to the people. And he also developed a more pragmatic and flexible approach to politics, avoiding ideological dogmatism and factionalism. Um, I think this is an interesting part to keep in mind because if you look at our leaders in the West today, who do we have that has a history that's so violent, and was sent to a place to work to the brink of starvation, and came out victoriously? I don't think we have anybody like that. So
I think it's a little bit similar to Draculia, the Romanian guy at the basis of the Dracula legend. Like he actually spent some time in the Ottoman Empire where he was tortured. And then, of course, when he came to power, he turned out to be even more brutal than the Turks were. So, I mean, we could probably find something that's kind of similar to that. Maybe something in the Soviet Union. We have to look for something like that, Stilgar. That's a good question.
Yeah. So yeah, and maybe actually, maybe Vladimir Putin would be somebody similar as well. Where
Andrew Jackson, he got whipped across the face by an English soldier during the American Revolution because the soldier wanted him to bend down and shine his shoes or something like that. And when he refused to do it, he just whipped him across the face and left him with a scar.
Yeah. Yeah, crazy. Okay. So onwards. Xi Jinping, he finally was able to join the Tsinghua University, one of the best universities in China, where he studied chemical engineering. And then he just graduated in 1979 and continued to work as party official. So he anyway he ended up getting a degree in chemistry. And actually, let me just disconnect here. Yeah, I'm just going to use my my data because the internet is terrible. So he ended up he ended up like slowly and steadily growing in the ranks, being very successful, and with China modernizing its economy. His dad was actually, when he was put back into a new position, he was in charge of the province where they first tried out this new system where they would still have a communist party, but they would try to use the capitalism or free market in their advantage. So his dad played an important role in that. And later on, that has also become part of Xi Jinping's approach, is to try to focus very much on getting an economy that supports the vision of China coming back to where they believe that China deserves to be. Because if you look at the history of China, it has always been one of the leading powers in the world up to about, I would say about 400 years ago, when it was slowly taken apart by the Western powers, mainly Europe, the US and Japan. But before that time, Europe was fairly insignificant compared to what China was doing with its Silk Road trade. And Xi Jinping is a big proponent of the One Belt Road Initiative. I don't know if you've heard of that before.
Yeah, I have.
Okay, yeah. So basically, the idea is that to rebuild this Silk Road that you previously had from China, from the Far East to the Middle East to Europe overland, instead of going around, which makes no sense at all to sail all across, like South Africa to make it to Asia.
You know what the reason for that, though, like for our side of it, for the European side, all the products that were coming from China and also India were changing hands. It wasn't like it was coming straight to us along this road. They would sell it, and then somebody else would mark it up and resell it. So it basically it was a retail relationship with multiple vendors or retailers in between. So everything was inflated. So that's one of the reasons why our ancestors decided to sail around the world, because it was actually cheaper for them to do so than to buy it after it had already changed hands so many times.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So yeah, but he's played a really big part in trying to modernize the U.S. or the Chinese economy, which of course has been extremely useful. Also, the way that they use it, where a Chinese party would always have to be involved if you want to do business in the China.
Yep.
You can't just go in there as Ford or General Motors. You need to find a local partner that owns at least 51% of the company. And through this way, they've done a lot of knowledge transfer from Western companies to China. And now they are leading in many regards, like, for example, when it comes to certain rare earth materials, drone technology, but also battery technologies, etc. So, Xi Jinping, and I also want to talk a little bit more about Xi Jinping, like how he came to power. So he was actually elected. So there were like there is this Chinese Communist Party, which has a lot of members. I think it's millions of members actually. But he was handpicked by people, giving him options, opportunities. And he was also pitted against other people. So it wasn't like said that he just rose to the ranks out of nowhere. He never would have been able to. So sometimes people have this like, okay, well, he's a dictator. Yes, so he is a dictator in many regards. But he didn't get there just by shrewd business practices or extortion or anything like that. Maybe that did play a role in it, but it was at first it was definitely the Chinese party that picked him, and it was based on some of his experiences that he did. For example, he was organizing the Beijing Olympic Games, and he was part of making sure that this that there were not any terrorist attacks. So in order to do this, Xi Jinping was actually one of the first that championed this idea of having surveillance cameras everywhere using facial recognition. And reading the book, he actually was a big player in this, and now this is currently being rolled out all over the country to a bigger extent. But this whole idea of a credit score system, he played a big part in getting this up and running, which people were impressed within the party of his ability to do this. He also played a really big part in the Uyghur people, and like finding ways to re-educate the people there. Xi Jinping played an elemental role in that, which I think is very interesting as well, because within China that is seen as a success story, because they were having a lot of issues with Uyghur Muslim extremists, and the Chinese people are for the most part thankful that he's brought stability and put an end to those terrorist attacks, which I think the last one was like back in 2015. So
yeah, but the way that he's dealing with the problem is by punishing their entire ethnic group and culture Like it's a collective it's a collective punishment, um, basically trying to erase them. I mean, on the one hand, it is an Islamic culture, and it is true that when you have Islam, there's going to be security risks. But on the other hand, it's like some of the stuff they do is so disgusting. Like I read this article once, and it was about this woman that was a Uyghur. Her and her husband, they moved away from China to Europe, and they weren't even really like that religious. They just wanted to go somewhere where they could breathe. And their daughter, she went and joined a protest, some kind of goofball left-wing protest, I think it was. And while she was there, she had like the Uyghur flag. And the Chinese government, they saw it, and I guess they did their facial recognition thing, and they decided to go after this woman. And not the girl, but the mother. So they told her, they sent her a letter saying, hey, there's an unresolved paycheck from your job that you used to work. So she decided to go back and get that money from her employer when she was in China. And then when she got there, they arrested her, and they took her down to the police station, and they told her, you know, you're under arrest for subversion. And basically the reason they arrested her was because her daughter was doing a pro-Uyghur protest in France or something like that. And so they took her to a prison camp, they shaved her head, and gave her an injection in her arm, which actually sterilized her for the rest of her life. So that was part of the processing, was to sterilize these people when they come in the camp. And then when they're in the camp, they make them sit and listen to atheist, communist propaganda, kind of in a classroom type setting. And if anybody falls asleep, they'll like beat that person. And they don't want anybody to pray. So if somebody's head is down, you know, if they're tired or their eyes are closed, they'll be like, stop praying. And then they would make them do all these exercises without, you know, getting enough sleep. And if somebody passes out or can't do it, then they would just take that person away, never to be seen again. So, you know, like we've said a lot of things about Islam, but I actually think the Chinese system is worse. You know, but I guess it's a matter of opinion. I'm not a fan of either, to be honest. I could never approve of his methods. I think his methods are to punish the innocent along with the guilty. I think he's more, I mean, he can say he's a Confucianist or whatever, but he's actually much more like the old legalist philosophy, the philosophy that Yin Zhang implemented and that Lord Sheng Yang called for, where you control everybody by giving extreme punishments for small offenses. Because Lord Sheng Yang, he said, you know, if you give extreme punishments for small offenses, then you won't have a problem with large offenses. And, you know, it looks a lot to me like a recurrence of this old this old legalist philosophy. And the thing about Yin Zhang, the Emperor Qin, is so unpopular, and he tortured the Chinese people so much that he was a one-man dynasty. After he was gone, they were like, no, we're not having any more of this. But I bet you that one of the reasons why Xi Jinping is doing all this surveillance and social credit system is because he wants to lock the CCP into power and make sure they never get booted out, no matter how outrageous and oppressive they become, and also genocidal. But anyways, go ahead and continue.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you. I wonder how much of that stuff is actually true.
I've seen lots of pictures, man. I saw, like, I guess a drone photo of all sorts of people bent over, you know, in a kind of an outdoor lot, and they're all wearing uniforms. They all had their heads shaved. So I mean, these people are like the love child of Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union.
Well, I mean, if you've read Gulag Archipelago by Solzhenitsyn, it's not surprising that a communist regime would do this, because religion has always been one of the enemies of
The state.
of communist the communist religion, I would say, because you can only, it's always seen as a threat, similar to as Christianity is seen as a threat within Islam, for example. But it is not tolerated when it's seen as a threat to the state. So there are some religious people within China. So you do have religions, but it all has to be controlled by the state, or otherwise they won't take it. And if you look at the Uyghurs, there were terrorist attacks. Many people were killed. It seems to be similar to what's happening today in many other parts of the world. Do I agree with this approach? No. Does the average Chinese person know that this is happening? No, I don't think so. Are they generally happy with the stability that has been created? I think yes. I think that's probably likely.
I don't know, man. I think in China, you can't really disagree. I mean, you disagree, your social credit score goes down, or you might just end up in the camp.
Yeah, but you're also not going to read about the Uyghurs. Or
if you read,
well, if the Uyghurs, it's also the we've all forgotten about them, but the Tibetans as well, right? They are also being oppressed, but even there with the Tibetans, or maybe especially there, it's not a black and white story. There are also a lot of Tibetans that actually like the Chinese.
Well, Tibet was annexed by China before communism, and one of the reasons they did it is because the Tibetans were actually harassing their trade routes. Like they were a huge nuisance, actually. So that there was a reason why it became part of China. But what I was going to say is, in China, if you read the wrong books, you'll get arrested. Like Falun Gong, they're the ones that put on all the Shen Yun plays, which I had the privilege of going to one. And you can get arrested for reading Falun Gong literature. You can get arrested for going to an unauthorized church. You know, they don't like Christians. They don't like Buddhists. It's kind of funny that Xi Jinping is, starting this Confucian Institute thing. And Confucianism is totally incompatible with communism. Confucianism, they talk a lot about familial piety and being a good, working hard, being loyal to your family, to your ancestors, your duty as a father, your duty as a son, your duty as a scholar, all this kind of stuff. Whereas in communism, so the Communist Manifesto is the blueprint for communism. And most people don't know it, but one of the things that is in the Communist Manifesto is they want to completely abolish the family. And they want to do away with the institution of marriage. And they want to make it so that you can have intercourse with any woman you want, but not exclusively. There's no exclusivity. And if there's any kids that result from that, the state takes the kids. So, one way when people say true communism has never been tried or fully implemented, they're right. Because, to my knowledge, no country has ever completely done away with the institution of marriage. Like in North Korea, they still get married. But there's always a chance that the state will take your kids anyways.
Yeah.
And they're really concerned with what you think and what you feel. Like it's a government that they want to get under your skin and in your brain. And it's very I find it very disturbing, everything these people are doing.
Yeah, I agree. I just wonder how how much do they? And I definitely agree. Like all these, like having, in a way, what has happened.
You can't really disagree. Okay, so there probably are a lot of, I'm sure there's like the Chinese version of normies that think their government is really on their side.
Well, I mean,
And
like you said, you can't really read anything otherwise, because even if
yeah,
you
it's
read
not
the wrong website, they're gonna arrest you. Which,
still.
by the way, is not all that far off from what's happening here in the West. In
Oh
some
yeah,
countries. But let's not digress. But I think there are a lot of Chinese people that don't really know, and I think it's also like it's hard to get a picture on this, but I think most likely this guy is actually quite popular within China. Just
mm,
like the whole thing, like everybody's saying like, oh, Putin, like everybody hates Putin. There's so many people saying that here in the West, he's just an evil dictator. Well, no, Putin is actually quite popular within Russia. Like the majority of the Russians like what Putin is doing. That's just
right.
the way it is. They just have a different view on how history is working. And by the way, the idea of Nixon opening up China to the West was always that, well, if we can get China away from Russia, that way we could maybe manage, deal with them, because we don't want them to get too close together. So let's open up relations with the Chinese, and then they don't form a huge bloc. And guess what's happened the past two or couple of years is that actually, Putin has kind of become the little brother to Xi Jinping. They're
Yeah.
closer than ever. They're closer than they were during the Cold War. But again, that's another topic. I just find it interesting. So it's hard to, I think it's hard for me to get a picture of how popular this guy is. But we have a different view on Xi Jinping than the average Chinese people. It's personal.
Yep. That's probably true, Stilgar, but the thing is, what's anybody going to do if he's unpopular? All he needs is the military, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's all that he has to be nice to. As soon as it's really the only threat to him. As soon as the military decides they don't like him, if they do, then that's it. He's gone. Kind of like what happened in Egypt where Sisi took over. Like the didn't matter about the people in the streets protesting or who voted for who. The fact is that the new government offended the military in some way, and the military was like, no, we're not having this. So, I mean, that's all that you need really is the military when you run this kind of system.
Yeah.
You couldn't even conduct a survey in China because, like, let's say that if you send somebody to the door, hey, what do you think of Xi Jinping? How would you rate him? Of course, everyone's going to give him the highest possible score.
Yeah, but I'm afraid most likely a lot of people do think he's doing well. Of course, with the whole the flu thing, which I won't mention because I think there's still algorithms picking that word up. That was unleashed.
Maybe we can start calling it the red fever.
Yeah, that created a lot of issues, but even that was turned into a win, where they said, well, the only way to deal with this is by using this totalitarian super state kind of situation where the government knows everything about you and you know nothing about the government. And that's the only way to deal with it. And that really seems to be the general public's idea coming out of this thing, which to me is frightening, because it's the system itself that created this thing and let it go unchecked for a very long time and let it spread all across the world. But anyway, I just thought it would be interesting to, and I want to keep it a little bit short because I think we've been going on for a while.
Okay.
I think it's interesting to see that this guy, he came up with a lot of these social credit scores. He is basically now ruler for life. He's in his third term, but he's basically been picked a ruler for life. But then again, like we don't really know what's going on between behind communist within the party top of the Communist Party. But yeah, it's an interesting guy, and I think it's very important not to underestimate him and not to be like, oh, it's just this character kind of guy, similar to what the West have done to Putin, right? He's extremely intelligent. He has highly original ideas that are different from the common ideas that like a old Marxist would have. Even though yes, Confucianism and communism they clash, but he's trying to create this new national identity, Chinese identity, and give China the place that it deserves in his mind and in the minds of many Chinese people, and also pay back for some of the humiliations that the Chinese people have suffered, because they have been humiliated by Western powers.
But now they're being humiliated by the CCP. Like I don't think it's the way I see it is, yeah, China is a big superpower, but the Chinese people themselves don't have any control over it. It's this oligarchy which historically hated their culture and tried to abolish it, and they still don't really let them fully express themselves. And there's actually an interesting cultural movement in China that I thought about doing like a topic on for myself, but I forgot about it until just now. But it's called Hanfu. Have you heard of it before?
Yeah, it's when they try to dress up like they're back in the year 1500 or something.
They're trying to dress in the traditional Mandarin style, and like Xi Jinping, he's worn this costume, and he's had his picture taken with other rulers wearing a similar costume, and they say it's a traditional Chinese costume, but it's actually Manchurian. So like before the Europeans started carving up China and also Japan, it was actually the Manchus that were in charge of it. It was a foreign dynasty. So that kind of long shirt is a Manchu fashion. It's not a Han fashion. And then the Manchus are also, I'm not completely sure, but I'm like 80%, I think so. They're the ones that caused them all to have that stupid haircut. So they're the Hanfu people. They're trying to get back to wearing the kind of stuff they wore before the foreigners took over, any kind of foreigners, and celebrate the traditional Chinese culture, because there are a lot of different ethnic minorities there, and some of them are encouraged to wear their traditional stuff, but for whatever reason, the Mandarin Chinese, which is the largest group, are not being encouraged to wear their traditional stuff. But yeah, I kind of stumbled across it on YouTube. It was kind of interesting, and they had these young people that were saying stuff like, we feel like our culture is not being celebrated, that we're being marginalized, and why are these minorities being celebrated but not us? And they had some Marxist professor saying, oh, these kids, they're just doing it for attention. This will pass, and oh, we don't need to do this. They're already the majority and everything. But I mean, you can be the majority and still have no power at all. Like when the Qing were ruling over them, and also when the Mongols were ruling over them, and now with the CCP ruling over them, they have no say in anything. And it looks like our government, and also in Europe, is wanting to implement the similar kind of system here with social credit score and everything. And I really hope that the system will fail, because if this becomes the new normal for most of the world, then it's pretty much lights out for civilization and freedom. Like it'll be a new age of darkness, like never has before been seen in the history of the world. Not just darkness in terms of evil, but also in terms of your access to information is going to go away. You'll only be able to see what they approve of. And it's also, again, it's kind of what the Emperor Qin did when he was there. He also hated Confucianism, Yingzhang, and he killed he burned a lot of books, and he killed a lot of scholars. And he wanted to have history start with him. Oh, this ancient history is not important. History should start with me. And also he thought that it was dangerous to have a learned class, and even more dangerous to let regular people have access to knowledge. So in some ways, again, history is rhyming. Not quite repeating, because now we have the technology to really put this kind of stuff into force, to watch you everywhere you go. Like in China, you get dinged in your social credit score if you go and pick up video games. What business is it of the state whether or not you pick up a video game? Like, who cares? Why does it matter? Like, if you're in the government, you're already rich enough. But these people are absolutely they're absolutely dystopian. They're obsessed with micromanaging people down to the individual level. I find it incomprehensible. Like, I don't care. I can barely manage my own self. I don't want to be managing someone else. Let people do their thing. You're already rich. What else do you want? It's very strange. I think there's a spiritual component to it, because I can't just explain everything these people are doing in terms of logic and effects and worldly goals, because they're already ridiculously rich. Like, if I was Xi Jinping, in the imperial China, the emperors had nice lives too, and they didn't care like what you ate and when you went to the bathroom. For the most part, they didn't. Yingzhang did, and he was a one-man dynasty. So, anyways,
I wonder. I think there's a good chance that China is going to come out victorious, and I think there's a good chance that the West is going to die.
We are dying, but we're not in charge of our countries anyways.
No, similar to China, I guess. But it's interesting. I read in the book that apparently Donald Trump's granddaughter and Joe Biden's granddaughter have one thing in common, and that's that they both know Chinese and they're learning Chinese. And apparently there's also a video. Maybe I'll be able to include it in this of Arabella Kushner singing fluently in Chinese or Mandarin to welcome Xi Jinping.
Well, some of Donald Trump's kids and in-laws are goofballs. They're not all on the same team. Like, I never thought, like, Ivanka was never any good, and Jared Kushner was never any good. They didn't support his policies. They never should have been allowed to have the offices that they had. But yeah, I actually considered learning Mandarin myself just because it sounds really cool. I really do like the Chinese civilization. It's one of the world's original pristine cultures. There's just a few. There's Egypt, Sumer, the Indus Valley culture, China, the Olmecs, and the Norte Chico culture. And out of all those, the only two that survives to this day is China and Egypt. And as for Egypt, it's only the Coptic community that survives, and they're dwindling. So there's a lot of cool stuff about China, but everybody that's listening needs to understand the CCP is not China any more than the Mongol dynasty was China. Like, it's an unwanted, it's an imposition. It shouldn't be there. It hates the Chinese culture. It doesn't trust the Chinese people with even basic stuff like what you want to do with your free time or where you want to travel. So I'm definitely not a fan. I would like to see China return to the dynastic period and really have Confucianism again and freedom of religion. And it would be a great civilization. It would be a place I would like to live. But the way it is right now, it's a nightmare. I mean, having to use a phone app to get into some building. Did you have your vaccination? You can't go inside.
Yeah.
Oh, you're complaining? Off to the camps.
That's clearly what seems to be like in vogue here in the West as well.
Yeah, because it'll allow the elites to grind the regular people down into slavery like never before, in such a debased state of slavery that you wouldn't be able to get out of it. I mean, that's one of the things that I wrote about in, you read my Flat World story that I wrote, right? Mm-hmm. Where the bad guys, that's what they do. The ruling class, they genetically modify the regular people into like a subhuman species that can no longer rebel. And that's what they'll do. Somebody's going to be saying, oh, you're crazy. Okay, if I'm crazy, just type in transhumanism and see what comes up. And also just look at China, what's being implemented there.
Yeah, I mean, we are witnessing a trans-Maoist, transhumanist agenda. I think that much is clear.
They're doing some weird. At any rate, I don't want to just make it go forever. Still, I could really go on about this forever. I think probably nobody wants to hear. So
I think it's important not to underestimate and to be aware that even though we barely know anything about this guy. Like when I started reading this book, I knew almost nothing about Xi Jinping.
Yeah, he doesn't really run his mouth like other dictators do, like the Kim Jongs and.
This guy is going to have a huge impact. He is going to reunite China with Taiwan. It's pretty obvious.
Well, I hope not, but if he decides to do it, then quite honestly, there's nothing the United States can do about it.
No, there's nothing they can do.
There's really nothing we can do. Our country's in total shambles. Military's in shambles.
You don't have the money. He'll just not buy any more of your debt, and that's all I have to do. And your whole country will go bankrupt. But I mean, this is it's important to know, like, because we're all so taken up by celebrities. I'm not. I don't give two hoots about any kind of celebrity, but most people are, and also about the latest sports ball, whatever, and it's just and then some people know a little bit about politics, and then when it's about politics, it's just whatever is happening in the U.S. maybe, or maybe like von der Leyen or somebody else nobody ever elected. But this guy is going to have a huge impact on our future. It's important to know where he's coming from. Don't underestimate him. This guy's smart. He's extremely intelligent. He's well read. He's gone through hardships. He's proven himself to be able. And honestly, I don't see anybody in the West being able to match with him at this point in time.
No. Yeah.
That includes Trump, by the way, who likes to brag about being good buddies with Xi Jinping.
Well, I think Trump can relate to him better than, the establishment rulers that we had. Like someone like Biden, he's just a meat puppet. He's not even there. And of course, Obama was very weak, and everybody knew that. He was effeminate. He was, the door that swang both ways, supposedly. But somebody like Xi Jinping
used to joke to Trump that you shouldn't have any terms. You should just, I would like you to stay in power forever. So which I think is funny, and actually that's probably true, because like at least with Trump you know what you're getting, like with some of these weak leaders you have nowadays. But yeah. Anyway, I just thought it was a very interesting book. I'll link it in the description. I know it's recent history, but history has an effect, and like the history of China and where they used to be in the world, and them retaking the place that they deserve. I think is an interesting one, and it deserves to have more attention than it's getting today.
Yeah, everybody should pay attention to this guy. He's a much bigger threat than Putin. I don't think Putin even has to be a threat. I find him pretty relatable. I think it's a shame the way this whole situation has been handled. It's definitely pushed Russia into the camp with China, and now because of that, I mean, that's pretty much it. I think in the United States, the best thing we could do is just to stay out of everything and work on building up our own country. Like, just leave it. Just leave all that stuff. We have lots of land.
If it hadn't been for the states, there would not be a war in Ukraine.
Right.
If it hadn't been for the states and the UK, and then we now know for a fact that Boris Johnson stopped the peace negotiations a year ago. So I mean, we're just making things. We're like self-sabotaging to
not us, man, the ruling class.
Yeah, but it's just ridiculous. Like, oh, keep fighting. Okay, well, how has that worked out? Everybody said, well, we're going to get Putin down on his knees. Well, if you look at the Russia economically, it's a midget. It's got the economy the size of Italy. It's nothing. But militarily, that's like the one strength that they still have. And they're like, oh no, we're just gonna give them weapons and they're gonna win. Well, how's that worked out? Like 600,000 plus young men have died. For what? It's gonna turn out that they're probably have to negotiate some kind of peace deal that probably is going to be worse than what they could have gotten a few years ago when all those people were still alive. It's just stupidest thing ever.
Yeah, but the politicians that wanted to get enriched out of it have all gotten enriched.
Yeah.
And also, I would say they probably really did hate Putin. I mean, they tried. They took him out of the SWIFT banking system. They tried to cancel the whole country. Like they cancel individuals and businesses that they don't like here in the United States. They tried to cancel a whole country, and it didn't work. I mean, Russia has endured very difficult.
West, they got China now to do business with, and they're selling to India and Japan. They're still buying their oil. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a colossal disaster. It's a colossal bumble and failure. Or maybe that's what they're trying to do. Maybe it's all about destroying the United States rather than.
Well,
yeah. Don't know.
It's feeling the brunt of it more than anything. But if it hadn't been for the Ukraine war, Geert Wilders wouldn't have won the election.
There we go. There's a silver lining.
Yeah, that's also one thing that the right has been warning about here is that, like, don't go into bed with Ukraine. They're a corrupt country, and that's been said like for the last 2 decades. But they have an agenda, and they want to do it anyway. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, and we don't know the full agenda.
I'll link the book in the description. It's worth a read. Keep this guy on your radar. Don't underestimate the Chinese. They're formidable people, and honestly, they have a formidable leader. And they're gonna be calling the shots soon. And they're using, right? It's been like Sun Tzu's art of war, like being quiet about their strength. But at some point, they're gonna show their cards, and I don't think we'll have anything to oppose their power, to be honest. So
no, yeah,
want to close out this episode, and let me know what you think about China and the Chinese, and anything else, any comments, other topics you want us to discuss, please let us know. we'll try to do some more of these episodes. I know we've both been extremely busy recently.
Hmm.
Yeah, we'll try to pump out some more episodes. Any last words, Hyber?
No, I think it's a good one, Stilgar. Obviously, I got a little heated, but everybody needs to understand, it's very important to know what's going on and to understand the world. And, you can use history to make sense of politics and geopolitics that are happening today, because, there are a lot of repeating patterns. One thing that happens over time is stuff tends to repeat, but it scales up. So I guess that's it. Yeah, good one. Thanks for bringing that up, Stilgar.